Today, we have a story that is as chilling as it is bizarrely fascinating. It's a tale of love, betrayal, and a dish served not cold, but fermented in the most unimaginable way. This is a story that will make you think twice about the secrets that can be hidden in plain sight in the most ordinary of objects. We are about to unravel the twisted tale of a woman who discovered her husband's infidelity and concocted a revenge so uniquely horrific, it will be seared into your memory. But before we dive into this shocking account, if you're a fan of true crime, dark mysteries, and stories that explore the complexities of the human psyche, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss the chilling content we have coming your way. Alright, are you ready? Settle in and prepare to take a journey into the heart of a truly gruesome crime. This is the story of the woman who murdered her husband's secret lover and stashed the body away in a giant shrimp paste vessel. The smell of shrimp paste, a pungent, savory aroma that clung to every fiber of our home, had once been a source of comfort to me. It was the scent of my childhood, of my mother's cooking, of a heritage passed down from one generation to the next. Our family business, a cornerstone of the local community, was more than just a livelihood. It was a part of our identity. The giant earthenware vats, standing like silent sentinels in our fermentation cellar, held not just a culinary staple, but the stories and secrets of our lineage. I never imagined that one day, one of those vats would hold a secret so dark, so horrific, it would threaten to consume my very soul. My husband, Ken, had been a man of simple tastes and, I believed, simple desires. We had met in university, two young souls drawn together by a shared ambition to build a life that was both meaningful and prosperous. He was a charming man, with a disarming smile that could melt the resolve of the sternest matriarch. When he proposed, it felt like the natural culmination of our love story, a promise of a future filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the pitter-patter of little feet. For a time, it was exactly that. We took over my family's business, and under Ken's astute management, it flourished. He had a gift for numbers, a way with people that I, with my more traditional, hands-on approach to the art of making Mam-Tom, lacked. We were a team, a partnership, or so I had thought. The first crack in the pristine veneer of our marriage appeared subtly. A hairline fracture I initially dismissed as a product of my own overactive imagination. It was the faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume on his shirts, a late business dinner that stretched into the early hours of the morning, a new preoccupation with his phone, his thumbs gliding across the screen with a furtiveness that set my teeth on edge. When I questioned him, he would flash that charming smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and offer a perfectly plausible explanation. A new client, a demanding project, the pressures of an expanding business. I wanted to believe him, I truly did. To doubt Ken was to doubt the very foundation upon which I had built my life. And so, I chose to ignore the gnawing voice in the back of my mind, the one that whispered of betrayal and deceit. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they became a deafening roar I could no longer ignore. The turning point came on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. Ken had called to say he'd be working late, a last-minute meeting with a potential international distributor. A knot of unease, a cold dread that had become an unwelcome companion in recent months, tightened in my stomach. On a whim, driven by a desperate need to reclaim some semblance of the intimacy we had lost, I decided to surprise him with a home-cooked meal. His favorite, a steaming bowl of pho, fragrant with star anise and cinnamon. I drove to the office, the pot of soup nestled carefully on the passenger seat, a hopeful, fragile smile on my face. The main office was deserted, the only sound the low hum of the air conditioning. The knot in my stomach cinched tighter. I called his phone and it went straight to voicemail. I was about to leave when I noticed a sliver of light from under the door of one of the smaller, seldom used conference rooms at the end of the hall. As I drew closer, I heard a sound that turned my blood to ice. A woman's laughter, light and carefree, followed by Ken's deeper, more familiar chuckle. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. My hand, trembling slightly, reached for the door. It wasn't locked. I pushed it open just a crack enough to see inside, and the world as I knew it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. He was there, my husband, his arms wrapped around a young woman, her head resting on his shoulder. They were not discussing business. They were not entertaining a client. They were locked in an embrace that spoke of a deep, practiced intimacy that should have been mine alone. I didn't recognize the woman, but her youth and beauty were a stark, painful contrast to the reflection I saw of myself in the darkened glass of the office window. I saw the fine lines around my eyes, the faint silver threads at my temples, the hands that were calloused and stained from years of working with shrimp and salt. And in that moment, I felt a wave of hatred so intense, so visceral, it threatened to drown me. I fled, the pot of faux forgotten on the cold, sterile floor of the empty office building. The drive home was a blur of tears and white-hot rage. The charming smile, the plausible excuses, the late business dinners, they all coalesced into a tapestry of lies, each thread woven with a deliberate, calculated cruelty. I had been a fool, a blind, trusting fool, and he had made a mockery of our vows, of our life, of me. When Kien finally came home that night, reeking of her perfume and cheap wine, I confronted him. The charming smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic, then a cool, hard defensiveness. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. The evidence was irrefutable, a scarlet stain on the crisp collar of our marriage. He tried to placate me with empty platitudes, with promises to end it, with pleas for forgiveness. But the words were hollow, meaningless. Trust, once the bedrock of our relationship, had been eroded, leaving behind a gaping chasm of bitterness and resentment. In the days that followed, a chilling calm settled over me. The tears dried up, replaced by a steely, glacial resolve. I watched Kien go through the motions of penitence, his every gesture, every word, a calculated performance designed to win back my trust. But the man I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger, a liar, a cheat, and the woman, the nameless, faceless woman who had stolen my husband, became the focal point of my rage. I became obsessed with her, my days consumed by a relentless, all-encompassing need to know everything about her. It wasn't difficult to uncover her identity. A private investigator, a large sum of cash, and a few discreet inquiries were all it took. Her name was Lynn. She was a recent university graduate, an intern at one of the firms Kien's business dealt with. She was young, ambitious, and, from the photographs the investigator provided, devastatingly beautiful. I studied her face for hours, memorizing every detail, every curve of her lips, every glint in her eyes. And with every passing moment, the hatred festered, a virulent poison seeping into the very marrow of my bones. I began to follow her, my car a shadow that tailed her every move. I learned her routines, her favorite coffee shop, the gym she frequented, the small apartment she lived in on the other side of town. I watched her laugh with friends, her head thrown back in a gesture of carefree abandon, and I felt a surge of fury so powerful it left me trembling. She had no right to be happy, to live her life as if she hadn't shattered mine. She had trespassed on sacred ground, and for that she had to be punished. She had to be erased. It was during one of these surveillance sessions, as I sat parked across the street from her apartment building, that the idea, a monstrous, grotesque seed of a thought, began to take root in my mind. I watched as she and Kien emerged from the building, their hands entwined. They were laughing, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights. They looked like a couple in the throes of a passionate, all-consuming love affair. And in that moment, I knew that I couldn't just let her go. I couldn't allow her to simply walk away from the wreckage she had helped create. She had to pay a price that was absolute. The shrimp paste vats. The thought came to me unbidden, a whisper from the darkest recesses of my soul. They were large enough, deep enough to hide a secret, a body. The fermentation process, the overpowering aroma, would mask any unpleasantness. It was a ghastly, ghoulish thought, the kind of thing one reads about in cheap crime novels. But in the warped landscape of my grief and rage, it made a strange, perverse kind of sense. It was a fitting end for the woman who had tried to steal my life, She would become a part of the very thing that had defined me, a part of my heritage. She would be consumed by the legacy she had tried to destroy. The plan began to form, each detail meticulously constructed, every contingency considered. I knew it was madness, a descent into a darkness from which I might never return. But the thought of Lynn, of her laughter, of her hands on my husband, fueled my resolve. I would not be a victim. I would not be the long-suffering wife who cried into her pillow while her husband built a new life with a younger, more beautiful woman. I would be the architect of my own justice. I would be the arbiter of her fate. The first step was to lure her to our home. I needed a pretense, a reason for her to come to the one place where I was in control, where I had the advantage. I created a fake social media profile, that of a young, ambitious female entrepreneur interested in learning about traditional methods of shrimp paste production. I sent her a message, complimenting her on her work, feigning an interest in her career. To my surprise, she responded. She was flattered, intrigued. We exchanged a few messages, and I suggested we meet in person, that I could give her a tour of our facility. She readily agreed. A date was set. On the day she was scheduled to arrive, a palpable sense of nervous anticipation hung in the air. Qian was away on a business trip, a convenient coincidence I had engineered with a few carefully placed suggestions. The house was quiet, the only sound the rhythmic hum of the refrigerators in the fermentation cellar. I had spent the morning preparing, my movements precise, almost robotic. I had selected the vat, one of the largest, tucked away in a dimly lit corner of the cellar. I had cleared a path, ensuring there were no obstacles in my way. And I had brewed a special batch of tea, a fragrant blend of herbs and a powerful, fast-acting sedative I had procured from a less-than-reputable online pharmacy. When the doorbell rang, my heart leaped into my throat. I smoothed down my dress, took a deep, steadying breath, and opened the door. There she was, Lynn, even more beautiful in person than in the photographs. She smiled, a bright, confident smile, and held out her hand. "You must be she said, her voice as light and musical as her laughter. I took her hand. Mine was cold and clammy. "And you must be Lynn. Please, come in." I was struck by how small she was, how delicate. It would be easy. The thought was as cold and sharp as an icicle in my gut. I led her into the house, my voice a calm, even veneer over the maelstrom of emotions churning within me. I offered her tea, and she accepted, her eyes darting around our home, taking in the family photographs, the comfortable, well-worn furniture. I wondered if she was picturing herself here, in my place. The thought sent a fresh wave of fury washing over me. We talked for a while, a stilted, superficial conversation about business and ambition. She was intelligent, articulate, everything a modern young woman aspired to be. And I hated her for it. I hated her for her youth, for her beauty, for her easy confidence. I hated her for making me feel old, and tired, and discarded. As the sedative began to take effect, her eyelids grew heavy, her words began to slur. She tried to fight it, a look of confusion and alarm flickering in her eyes. But it was too late. She slumped forward, her head coming to rest on the table, a single perfect tear rolling down her cheek. For a long moment, I just stared at her, at the still, silent form of the woman who had ruined my life. There was no triumph, no satisfaction, only a hollow, aching emptiness. But I had come too far to turn back. I had crossed a line, a moral event horizon from which there was no return. Getting her to the cellar was the hardest part. She was heavier than she looked, a dead weight that I struggled to maneuver down the narrow, winding stairs. The air in the cellar was thick with the pungent, salty smell of fermenting shrimp, an aroma I would forever associate with this nightmarish act. I heaved open the lid of the chosen vat, the heavy earthenware groaning in protest. The paste within was thick and bubbling, a viscous, putrid mass, waiting. With a final, desperate surge of adrenaline, I lifted her, her body limp and pliable in my arms, and pushed her into the vat. She disappeared with a sickening, gurgling splash, the dark liquid closing over her head, swallowing her whole. I sealed the vat, my hands trembling so violently I could barely secure the lid. And then, in the gloomy, oppressive silence of the cellar, surrounded by the ghosts of my ancestors and the tangible proof of my monstrous crime, I sank to the floor and wept. I wept for the woman I had once been, for the life I had lost, and for the soul I had just irrevocably damned. The smell of shrimp paste, once a source of comfort, was now the stench of death, a constant, suffocating reminder of the secret I now had to keep, a secret that would fester and rot, just like the body in the vat, until it consumed me completely. The days immediately following the act were a surreal tableau of domestic normality. I cooked, I cleaned, I managed the household accounts. I moved through the familiar spaces of my life like a ghost, my hands performing tasks my mind could barely register. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, each room echoing with a silence that was heavier, more profound than the mere absence of sound. It was the silence of a secret, a monstrous truth that had taken root in the very foundations of our home, in the dark, damp earth beneath the cellar floor. The most difficult part was the cellar itself. For decades, I had descended those stone steps with a sense of purpose, of continuing a legacy. Now, every trip was a pilgrimage to a tomb of my own making. The air, thick with the familiar, pungent smell of fermentation, now seemed to carry a sickly sweet undercurrent, a phantom scent of decay that only I could perceive. I would find myself standing before the sealed vat, my hand hovering over the cool earthenware, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I was torn between a morbid compulsion to look, to confirm the reality of what I had done, and a paralyzing fear of what I might see. What if she had floated? What if, by some grotesque miracle, she was looking back at me? I never unsealed it. The risk was too great, the potential for a complete unraveling of my sanity too certain. Kien's return from his business trip was the first true test of my resolve. He walked through the door, weary from travel, and dropped his bags with a sigh. I greeted him with a kiss, a carefully practiced gesture of affection that felt like a lie on my lips. He was distracted, his eyes distant. For a day we spoke of trivialities, the trip, the business, the neighbors. But I could feel her presence between us, an unspoken third party in our marriage. It began on the second night. We were in bed, the darkness a thick blanket around us. "It's strange," he said, his voice a low murmur. "Lynn isn't answering her phone." My blood ran cold. I forced my breathing to remain even, my body still. "Maybe she's busy?" I offered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Or perhaps her phone died." "I've tried for 2 days," he said, a note of frustration creeping into his voice. "I've emailed her, messaged her. Nothing. It's not like her to just disappear." I feigned a sleepy indifference. "I'm sure it's nothing, Kien. She's a young woman. She probably went away for the weekend with friends and forgot to tell you." The ease with which the lie came terrified me. It was as if a new, colder, more calculating version of myself had taken control. But Kien's anxiety was a persistent, growing thing. It filled our house, a nervous energy that set my own frayed nerves on edge. He paced the floors, his phone permanently attached to his hand, his face etched with worry. I had to watch him, this man I had once loved, grieve for the woman I had murdered. It was a unique and exquisite form of torture. I had wanted to cause him pain, to make him suffer as I had suffered. But I had not anticipated the slow, corrosive effect of witnessing that suffering firsthand, of having to offer comfort and reassurance while my soul screamed with the knowledge of what I had done. A week later, the police came. 2 plainclothes detectives, their faces impassive, their questions polite but probing. Lynn's family had filed a missing person report. As her employer and a close associate, Kien was one of the first people they wanted to speak to. I played the part of the dutiful, unsuspecting wife to perfection. I made them tea, my hands steady, my expression one of mild concern. I sat beside Kien on the sofa, a supportive presence, as he recounted his last meeting with Lynn. He lied, of course. He painted their relationship as purely professional with a friendly, mentor-like quality. He spoke of her ambition, her intelligence. His voice thick with a carefully modulated sadness. He omitted the stolen afternoons, the secret dinners, the embrace I had witnessed in the cold light of the empty office. Each lie he told was a fresh betrayal, not just of our marriage, but of the woman he claimed to be so worried about. And with each lie, I felt a strange, dark sense of vindication. We were bound together now, not by love, but by a shared web of deceit. They asked me a few questions. Had I met her? Did Kien ever speak of her? I answered simply, honestly, that I had never had the pleasure of meeting Miss Lin, and that my husband rarely brought his work home with him. They thanked us for our time and left, leaving a chill in their wake. The investigation became a constant, low-grade hum in the background of our lives. Lin's face was on the news, her smiling photograph a ghostly apparition on our television screen. Her friends and family made tearful pleas for her safe return. Each news report was a fresh torment, a reminder that Lin was not just an abstract symbol of my husband's infidelity, but a person, a daughter, a friend, a woman with a life and a future that I had stolen from her. My psychological state began to fray at the edges. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were haunted by images of water, dark and murky, of a pale hand reaching up from the depths. The smell of shrimp paste became my personal hell. I started to imagine I could hear things from the cellar, a faint scratching, a muffled cry. I knew it was my guilt, my mind playing tricks on me. But the fear was real, a physical presence that left me breathless and trembling. I developed obsessive routines. I would check the lock on the cellar door a dozen times a day. I began to clean the house compulsively, scrubbing floors and walls as if I could wash away the stain of my crime. I became withdrawn, avoiding friends and social gatherings, terrified that my guilt was written plainly on my face, a scarlet letter that only I could not see. Kien, lost in his own world of grief and anxiety, barely noticed the change in me. Or if he did, he attributed it to the stress of the police investigation and the media attention. Our conversations became stilted, empty exchanges. The emotional chasm between us had widened into an unbridgeable abyss. We were two strangers cohabiting in a mausoleum, the air thick with unspoken words and the specter of a dead woman. One afternoon, the fragile facade of my control nearly shattered. One of our oldest employees, an elderly man named Mr. Min who had worked for my father, came to me with a request. A particular strain of bacteria used in our most traditional recipes was kept in a cool, dark corner of the cellar, the very corner where the vat stood. He needed a new culture to start a fresh batch. Panic seized me, cold and absolute. "No," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "That corner is unstable. I've noticed some cracks in the foundation. It's not safe." Mr. Min looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "But he said, "I was down there just last month. It seemed fine." "It's a recent development," I snapped, my heart pounding. "I have called a structural engineer. Until he gives us the all-clear, no one is to go into that section of the cellar. We will use a different culture for now." He acquiesced, though his expression was one of bewilderment. I fled to my room, my body shaking uncontrollably. It was a close call, a stark reminder of how precarious my situation was. The secret was not a static thing, buried and forgotten. It was a living, breathing entity, a time bomb ticking silently in the heart of my home, waiting for the right moment to detonate. As the weeks turned into months, the police investigation stalled. Without a body, without any evidence of foul play, Lin's disappearance was just another cold case, her file relegated to a dusty cabinet. The media moved on to new tragedies, and her smiling face slowly faded from the public consciousness. A strange, unsettling sense of security began to creep in. Perhaps I had done it. Perhaps I had committed the perfect crime. But any relief I felt was overshadowed by the change in Kien. The initial anxiety had given way to a deep, brooding melancholy. He drank more, spoke less. The charming, ambitious man I had married was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed ghost. One night, I found him in his study, a bottle of whiskey in his hand, staring at a photograph on his phone. It was a picture of him and Lynn, smiling, their heads close together. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a raw, unguarded pain. "I loved her, he whispered, the words slurring slightly. "I know it was wrong. I know I destroyed us. But I loved her." I stood there, frozen, the confession a physical blow. To be forced to bear witness to his love for her, to be his reluctant confidant in his grief, was a cruelty I could never have imagined. My rage, which had cooled to a slow-burning ember, flared back to life. "Get out," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. He looked at me, confused. "What? Get out of my house?" I repeated, the words like chips of ice. He stood up, his face hardening. "Our house, my name is on the deed, too. Or have you forgotten that?" The argument that followed was brutal, a toxic spew of all the bitterness and resentment that had been festering between us for months. We threw accusations and insults like stones, each one intended to wound, to draw blood. In the end, he stormed out, the front door slamming shut behind him. I was left alone in the silent house, the echoes of our angry words hanging in the air. I had gotten what I wanted. I had driven him away. But there was no victory, no sense of triumph. There was only the crushing weight of my solitude, the suffocating presence of my secret, and the ever-present, cloying smell of shrimp paste rising from the cellar below. I had wanted to protect my marriage, my legacy. Instead, I had embalmed it, preserving it in a state of living death, with the body of my husband's lover as its silent, rotting centerpiece. Time has a way of sanding down the sharpest edges of horror. As 1 year bled into the next, the constant, high-pitched frequency of my fear subsided into a dull, chronic ache. Kien had returned a few days after our fight, and we had settled into a fragile, unspoken truce. We were business partners, roommates, co-conspirators in a marriage that was now nothing more than an empty shell. The passion, the anger, even the hatred, had been replaced by a vast, weary emptiness. The police never came back. Lynn's case was officially declared inactive. It seemed my secret was safe, buried deep in the earthenware tomb in my cellar. The business, ironically, had never been better. Freed from the emotional turmoil of his affair, Kien threw himself into his work with a renewed, almost manic focus. He secured new contracts, expanded our distribution network, and our family's shrimp paste became more successful than ever before. I played my part, overseeing production, maintaining the quality that was our hallmark. We were a well-oiled machine, efficient and lifeless. The catalyst for the end came, as it so often does, in the form of good news. Kien burst into the house one evening, his face flushed with a triumphant excitement I hadn't seen in years. "We got it, he exclaimed, waving a sheaf of papers. "The contract with the European Food Consortium. It's the biggest deal of our lives. This will put us on the international map." I felt a prickle of unease. "That's wonderful, Kien." "It is," he said, his enthusiasm uncontainable. "They want a massive shipment and they want it in 6 weeks. We'll have to use everything we have in reserve. Every last vat of the premium, 5-year aged stock." And then I heard it. The ticking of the bomb, which had been silent for so long, started up again, loud and deafening in my ears. The 5-year aged stock. The vats in the far corner of the cellar. Her vat. "No," I said, the word escaping my lips before I could stop it. Kien's smile faltered. "No? What do you mean, no?" This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That batch is. It's not ready?" I stammered, my mind racing for a plausible excuse. "I've been monitoring it. The pH levels are off. It's spoiled. We can't use it." He stared at me, his brow furrowed. "Spoiled? The entire corner? That's our most stable fermentation area. It's never spoiled before." "Well, it has this time," I insisted, my voice rising with panic. "We have to destroy it. We can't risk our reputation by sending out a bad product." "Destroy it?" he said, his voice laced with disbelief. That's tens of thousands of dollars worth of product. I'm not destroying anything until I've seen it for myself. He started towards the cellar door. I moved to block his path, my body a rigid wall of desperation. Ken, don't. I forbid it. It's a biohazard. The fumes could be toxic. He stopped, his eyes narrowing, studying my face with a new, sharp intensity. For 2 years, he had looked at me without really seeing me. But now he was looking. He was seeing the wild-eyed terror, the sheer, unadulterated panic. The pieces, scattered and disconnected for so long, began to click into place in his mind. My strange, vehement opposition, my long-standing, bizarre prohibition of anyone going near that corner of the cellar, my transformation from a heartbroken wife to a haunted, brittle shell of a woman. "What's in that vat, Mai?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "I told you, it's spoiled shrimp paste." I whispered, my throat tight. "Move," he commanded. I didn't. I stood my ground, my body trembling. He took my arm, his grip like iron, and moved me aside. He unlocked the cellar door and descended the stairs, and I followed, a condemned prisoner on her way to the gallows. He walked to the back corner, to the row of silent, dusty vats. He stopped in front of the one. The air was thick with the smell, a smell that for me was now synonymous with death and damnation. "It's this one, isn't it?" he said, his hand resting on the earthenware lid. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, begging me to give him another lie, another explanation, anything but the monstrous truth that was dawning on him. I couldn't speak. I could only nod, a single jerky movement of my head. A sob, dry and ragged, tore through me. With a look of grim resolve, he put his hands on the lid. It was heavy, sealed with dried paste and the passage of time. He strained, his muscles bunching, and with a grotesque, sucking sound, the seal broke. He lifted the lid away. The smell that rose from the vat was indescribable. It was the familiar, pungent aroma of our livelihood, but it was corrupted, twisted into something foul and unholy. Ken recoiled, his hand flying to his mouth. He peered inside. The contents were a dark, viscous slurry, but something had risen to the surface. After 2 years of slow, horrifying dissolution, the briny, acidic paste had done its work. But some things resist decay more than others. A shard of bone, unnaturally white against the dark sludge, and a small gold pendant, a simple L, miraculously untarnished, suspended in the muck. Ken staggered back, his face a mask of utter horror and disbelief. He looked from the contents of the vat to me, and the last vestiges of the man I had married, the man who had grieved, the man who had lived in ignorance, died in his eyes. He saw me truly and completely, for the monster I had become. "You," he breathed, the word a whisper of revulsion. "Oh God, you!" All the lies, all the pretense, all the years of carefully constructed denial crumbled to dust. She was destroying us. I cried, the words pouring out of me in a torrent of long-suppressed anguish. "I did it for you. I did it for us. To protect our life, our family, our legacy." "Legacy?" he spat, his voice trembling with a rage that was terrifying in its intensity. He gestured wildly at the vat. "This is our legacy? A tomb? A stinking, rotten grave? You didn't protect anything, you destroyed it all." He turned and ran from the cellar, his panicked footsteps echoing on the stone stairs. I was left alone with my crime, finally irrevocably unsealed. The smell, a nauseating miasma of fermented shrimp and death, filled my lungs, a final, suffocating embrace. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes or hours. But eventually, I heard a new sound, a distant, piercing wail that grew steadily closer. Sirens. He had made his choice. In the end, his horror had outweighed his instinct for self-preservation. Or perhaps, in his own twisted way, this was his final act of love for Lynn. Justice. When the police came down the stairs, they found me sitting on the floor, leaning against the vat, my face streaked with tears. I didn't resist. There was no fight left in me. I had been living in a tomb for 2 years, and in a way, my arrest was a kind of liberation. The story became a media sensation, of course. The shrimp paced murderous. It was a tale too bizarre, too gruesome to resist. Our family name, once a symbol of quality and tradition, was now synonymous with a macabre horror story. The business, the legacy I had killed to protect, was ruined, its reputation tainted forever. As I sit in my cell, the smell of antiseptic and bleach a poor substitute for the pungent aroma that defined my life, I often think about that vat. It was more than just a hiding place. It was a symbol of everything I had been, everything I had lost, and everything I had become. It was the vessel of my heritage and the coffin of my soul. I had taken the substance of my life and used it to conceal a death, and in doing so, I had caused my own life to ferment into something unrecognizable, something rotten to the core.